one step at a time, gonna live it on the line. Welcome back to Rowan's Revenue Review. Today's lesson, oligopolies. An oligopoly is defined as a state of limited competition in which a market is shared by a small number of producers or sellers. But to fully understand how it differs from other forms of competing markets, we must understand the different assumptions of the model. Firstly, we must understand that the market is not very saturated by firms, and it only consists of a few large firms. Thus, they have more price-making power and market control than any firm in a perfectly competitive market, but less market power than a firm present in a monopoly. Secondly, we must understand that there are no hindrances posed to deter many firms joining a market and oversaturating it. Thus, we assume that there must be barriers to entry present in the market. Oligopolies are characterized by high barriers for entry, such as high initial fixed costs, access to resources, economies of scale, legal barriers such as licenses and patents, and the employment of aggressive anti-competitive tactics. Firms present in an oligopoly often compete in a nice, non-price discriminatory manner, meaning that they entail homogeneous goods and differentiated goods. Finally, we must understand that in an attempt to maximize profits, oligopolies may often collude, thus becoming interdependent. This means that they must operate through a method resembling a prisoner-style dilemma. Game theory explains the prisoner-style dilemma and uses applied mathematics to understand how individuals act strategically, where their success depends on the choices made by the others in the so-called game. This is used to explain the strategic interdependence between firms in an oligopoly, as it shows how one firm altering their advertising or pricing methods will have an opportunity cost inflicted on a competing firm, which could in the long run be detrimental to the market as a whole. Thus, instead of a firm doing this, many firms will be offered the incentive to collude instead. Through this, we are introduced to what economists refer to as open formal collusion in a market. This means that the firms in a market will work collaboratively, often in each other's best interest. This is known as firms forming a cartel. Through this, firms in a collusive oligopoly can essentially take on the role of a monopoly with total price-making power. Although extremely beneficiary in idea, most countries have made this collusion illegal in an attempt to ensure that a market is operating at the socially optimal level and isn't abusing its market power. As you can see here, this collusive oligopoly graph resembles mostly a monopoly graph, with the demand line being straight and the market revenue line being twice as steep as the demand line. Here we can see that abnormal profits are being made, and assuming the market operates as a collusive oligopoly in the long run, abnormal profits will be possible in the long run. We can also see that this market structure is not meeting allocative efficiency or productive efficiency. In an attempt to bypass laws against formal collusion in oligopolies, firms will often form tacit or informal colluding oligopolies. This would be when all firms in a market have an unspoken agreement to follow the price making of one dominant firm that would have been specified between them. Collusive oligopolies are different from non-collusive oligopolies, for example. In a non-collusive oligopoly, firms reject the idea to work collaboratively, thus are seen as enemies to each other within a firm. As you can see here, of two firms in a market, one firm would raise the price, and of course the alternating firm would then ignore the price raise, resulting in an elastic demand curve, as shown in the top portion of here. This is because if one firm raises the prices, of course consumers are less likely to spend money on their good because they have a higher price as opposed to a different firm. However, if the firm reduces the price, the opposing firm will be forced to match that, as they are all in a competition to have the lowest price to increase the amount of consumers buying their product. Thus, that leads to an inelastic demand curve, as seen in the second portion. However, in this diagram, we see that this kinked demand curve results in a kinked marginal revenue curve as well, with a vertical gap in between here, due to the different slopes of each section of the demand curve. This vertical section of the marginal revenue curve causes something known as price rigidity. As you can see, the marginal costs increasing or decreasing within this section here will not change the quantity produced of the market or the price at which this quantity is sold at. Thus, we see as marginal costs change, price will stay the same, causing what we know as price rigidity. Because of price being rigid, as you can see here, many firms choose to compete in non-price competition as to avoid events such as price wars. This non-price competition is known and can be expressed through things such as advertising, and is known when two brands, for example, may advertise the luxuries of each of their goods, despite them being homogeneous and quite similar.
Hey, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.